Alrighty, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this morning's session. Pricing metric madness, navigating the AI pricing labyrinth with a simple framework. We have Michael Mansard here from Zuora again. So thank you, Michael, so much for being a willing panelist for this session, and Stephen Forth from Ibbaka. Michael's the Director of Subscription Strategy at Zuora. And today we're just going to be going over quickly the themes of the session, and as well as we're going to sort of go light, and then deep, heavy, deep, I guess you could say, with Michael, because he's got this exciting compass framework we're going to be going over. So yeah, welcome from wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Put in the comments if you'd like, wherever you're signing in from. So today I'll throw it over to Stephen and Michael.
Liam, I don't think we're sharing the deck.
Yeah, I'm doing that now. There we go.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Liam. We've got a lot to cover and discuss today. So Michael and I will give very brief self-intros, Jiko Shokai, as they say in Japanese, and then we'll flow into it. So Michael.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. So yeah, Michael, as you mentioned, based out of Paris, very sunny today. I'm the chair of the Subscribe Institute, which is a think tank. It's about 1,500 members strong. I've been working on monetization across industries, countries, the globe with 400 companies. And as you know, Stephen, I'm a nerd when it comes to subscription recurring businesses. So I'm a startup investor, advisor, and board member in startups doing subscription businesses. And I'm also a lecturer at INSEAD, which is quite a great business school where I co-created the Subscription Business Bootcamp. And the next session is actually in September. So great to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
Stephen Forth, co-founder and CEO of Ibbaka. And like Michael, I am a pricing, packaging, subscription nerd. Also a design geek. And the way I see it is that pricing is something that is designed, and we need to bring design-centric thought processes and approaches to the design of pricing models and packaging models. And I think that Michael has been one of the people leading the world in insights into how we do this and coming up with compelling processes, doing real research-driven analysis, and using that research to inform the design of frameworks that all of us can use. And Michael will be introducing a compelling new framework today. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit about today's themes and some of the things that Michael and I are seeing in the market. So you'll hear a lot about agents, and I'm sure you are seeing a lot about agents in your day-to-day work. The big challenge for many SaaS companies today is how to think about agents. We're going to talk about trends in agent packaging, and then we're going to go deep into choosing pricing metrics and how you evaluate pricing metrics using the Compass framework. And the Compass framework is new to the world, but it has been used already in quite a few applications with Zuora and Ibbaka customers. And at the end, we are going to be inviting you to join us in helping to improve the Compass framework. So let's go on to the next slide. Liam? Yeah, so this is a poll. We just want to get a feeling for how people are thinking about and where they are on their journey towards AI agents. And since I'm not allowed to vote, I will just say that Ibbaka will be introducing its first agent in June. Expect lots more on that over the coming weeks. And I would love to ask Michael about Zuora's strategy, but I suspect that that will be released through official channels.
Absolutely. So while there's some votes, we do have agents actually in place, especially in the media space, where we have agents actually optimizing paywalls. So what we call dynamic paywalls. So think of it on your media website. Depending on many information, the agent actually automatically makes decision, about when is the right moment to play with the paywall and which package should be displayed to you. And that's completely agentic, and that's reinforcement learning based. So that's, let's say, for what's very official.
All right, I'm gonna call it and share the results now.
Good. So fairly similar to the results from last week's poll, where we had the CEO of HiveMind talking about, not HiveMind, BrightHive, talking about BrightHive's agent strategy. So I think this will be interesting for everyone here. Let's go on, Liam. Michael, do you want to speak to this slide?
Yeah, that's just the money slide. I'll be very quick. It's just to say that today, when I look at the analysts, all of them say that the agentic market is, between $4 to $6 billion in 2025. We assume a 45 to 50%, growth year over year, which should land us around 150 to $100 billion by 2034. So, Gen AI was big, and I think agentic AI is what unlocks the value and what unlocks the big revenue streams and what is going to really revolutionize SaaS. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but that makes you think.
And I'd just like to underline something that Michael said there, that agents are what is going to unlock the value of generative AI for B2B SaaS. And some of people are questioning why all this focus on agents. Why agents? And I think that there are 5 things driving this. Agents can be designed to be very task specific. They improve automation, but they really focus, and they help focus on the critical piece of business value that's being delivered. We are all incredibly busy, and agents take some of that busyness off of our shoulders through autonomous and intelligent decision making. And the reason that agents are called agents is because they are able to do things, that they have agency. And this will actually make most of our lives a lot better, at least if we do a good job of designing and packaging and pricing it. Large, cumbersome B2B SaaS applications have become a problem for businesses. There was an old joke that what you do when you implement an ERP system is you take your current business processes and you pour concrete over them. I hate to say it, but many mature B2B SaaS applications mean that you take somebody else's business processes that they've poured concrete over and they enforce their way of thinking on you. And we need to move to a much more modular and scalable approach, and agents enable that. We are seeing a proliferation of agents in the world. Many of us, on this webinar today use a revenue intelligence platform such as Gong. If you haven't been on Gong's website, go and take a look and see how they are repositioning Gong around agents and how many agents they document on their website. It's very, very interesting. And finally, we know that for generative AI to be really impactful in business, it has to have a very clear use case, a very strong use case, and many of those use cases are very industry specific. So generic horizontal applications are going to be vaporized by specific agents, and we will be accessing functionality through agents. Why don't we go on here, though, to just talk about some of the big things we're seeing. Uh, so I'm just going to walk through these very quickly, Michael, and then turn the talking stick over to you. FinAI is everybody's favorite example of outcome-based pricing. And it's worth taking a look at this. And if you have not been to Intercom's pricing page recently, go and take a look and see how they've repositioned FinAI. Two very interesting things. One, FinAI is now part of each of the main packages, but also FinAI is available to use with other customer support systems. This, I think, is a really compelling strategy. Another thing that we are seeing a lot for people with existing applications is that they are providing their customers, with the ability to build agents. And this is, I think, a very powerful trend. This is a sort of sumo strategy, to use the judo versus sumo strategy approach, where people who have large applications have an advantage over incumbent agent-first companies. So if you have a large existing application, one of the things you should be considering is, how do I give my customers the ability to build agents on my platform? Credit systems, or credit buckets, or however you like to refer to them, these are becoming more and more common as an approach to pricing families of agents, but also agent creation. And finally, Michael has mentioned this in many of his conversations with people, orchestration is going to be really critical. And an example of that is IBM's Watson X Orchestrate platform, but all of the major vendors have orchestration. And anyone who has more than one agent is going to need to provide orchestration. But Michael, what are some of the things that you're seeing?
Exactly what you're describing. I'll probably give some examples as I introduce the framework as well, but one piece that I'd like to highlight, which is quite interesting, and keep me honest on that. I know we have some strong strategists in the room around product, like Stuart, who's I see is connected. What I see is the importance of protocols, which are going to be key to unlock value. And when I look at the history of IT, software and SaaS, I've never seen at such an early stage agreements between large players in terms of standards and protocols, which I think is going to be the key thing to unlock value, but it's also going to be a major battleground in terms of how one attributes value. If you have a team of agents, let's say around health, to manage an outcome, which is, for example, patients' well-beingness, how do you split the value if you have different agents from different vendors? And there's agents that are here to orchestrate, agents that are here to render a service, and agents that are here to, I don't know, interface with older systems, for example. So I think at the same time, it's really impressive to see at such an early stage. We're in the infancy stage, right? It's like what, a year maximum we've been talking about agents, and we have already protocols on which competitors are agreeing on. I think that for me is a massive change and something I've never seen at such an early stage.
I think that's important. And at some point, we should actually dive in and have a webinar on the protocols and their relevance to packaging and pricing. There's
Absolutely.
lots of webinars about the protocols themselves, but we should at some point dive deep into what they mean for people in the packaging and pricing space.
Absolutely.
So we're about to shift towards a conversation that's more specific to pricing metrics and pricing metrics for agents. So for those of you who either do have agents in the market, or are far enough along in your work that you can answer this question, please take a look at this and say, how are you planning to price the agents that you have in the market today? always interesting to see how many people are using outcome-based pricing. I'm actually going to write down on paper the number that I think will be outcome-based pricing. And then I'll tell you what I wrote down after before Liam closes the poll, but before we share the results. Maybe Michael, you can do the same.
So Stephen, I'm just responding to a question that I just want to validate as people, answer the poll. Is it going to be recorded?
Yes,
yes, and it will be on YouTube based on past experiences, correct?
Yes, it will be recorded, and we will share a link to the recording together with this deck and possibly some other resources. Oh, you showed it before I had to answer. So, oh my goodness, I was wrong. So the number I wrote down for outcome-based was 5%. Michael, did you write down a number?
Yes, but I'm biased. I did put the number from my research. So,
Well, you were closer. You were
yes.
closer. I thought of doing that, but then I thought people would say you're just copying Michael's research. So 14%, that's interesting and great. Now we've got a pretty small N here. Not everyone on the call today answered, but still that's interesting. And why don't we go on now to talk about how we price agents?
And
So just a
Stephen,
couple of things.
I
Go
just
ahead, Michael.
one little thing. I'd be interested after we present, and keep us honest on that, by the way, Liam, as well, that we just ask people after we define what outcome really is, if some of you may change their mind and would have put it in a different category, by the way, because it could come to just to the fact that how people define outcome. But let's come back to that after. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay. So just a couple of things to note about pricing generally and pricing for agents is that most people are using, or most companies are using hybrid metrics. Now that sounds cool and fun, but the question then becomes what hybrid metrics? Because once you start using hybrid, you open up many different possibilities. And in fact, most of them won't work. And then the other thing that we see is that credit buckets are on the rise. More and more people are using credit buckets to design, but you still need to design what goes into a credit and what a credit buys and how it can be transferred or rolled over. So the design of credit-based pricing systems is emerging as a critical state-of-the-art practice. And I hate to say it, but I've reviewed about 12 credit-based pricing systems over the last 3 months. And of those 12, 10 of them were cost-based, which, for pricing experts just makes us sad. But anyway, I'd like to let's go on because we've got a lot to dive into. So we've already talked about in previous sessions, and there's lots of material available online about this. Ibbaka thinks about AI agent pricing using the pricing layer cake, where we start with the role. What job is this agent meant to be doing? Then there is another possibility of pricing using access or availability. And when compute is a scarce resource or a resource that needs to be managed, this can actually be a fairly compelling pricing metric. And we're seeing this in agents that are heavy on compute. Then there's usage-based metrics, and finally outcomes-based metrics. But let's go on because Michael has some really exciting stuff to introduce us to us today. So Michael.
Absolutely. And Stephen, feel free to step in at any time by any means. And of course, any questions in the chat, feel free to respond. There's some great ones, and feel free to ask any questions, by the way, in the chat, and we'll do my best to also respond. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but it's just to tell you guys that what we're going to present is part of a larger, it's not fully finalized. It's really a first way to introduce it. Think of it as a 7-step type of thing. The premise, or the prerequisites, is we assume, which is a big assumption, by the way, is that you've defined your packaging model. And that's something, of course, we should discuss also about what's the impact of agentic in terms of packaging. So let's assume you know your package and you really want to nail your pricing metric. So I came up with that framework, and Stephen jumped on the bandwagon as well, and he's helping a lot. So let's say it's our framework. It's a 7-step framework. So the very first step is really to start defining the AI's job to be done, the job, understanding the customer goals and so on. You need to be grounded in value. Again, I won't go into detail. It's just to give you the steps. The second step is really to locate where you are in that matrix that I will introduce in the next slide, which is a 3x3 matrix, which helps you define your typology. The third one is to actually investigate adjacent typologies of metrics. You'll see it's very easy. Then you're going to list metrics. Then you're going to score and evaluate the metrics to pick the right ones that you want to use. Metrics as in pricing metrics. Last, you may decide to layer, which is what Stephen introduced before, the cake layering. And last, you're going to have to iterate, because frankly, on a daily basis, you're going to have new insight, new needs, and you may need to change your pricing very quickly. And that's what we've seen with Gen AI, by the way. And we're going to see the exact same thing, if not worse or more, when it comes to agentic. So I'm going to be focusing for now on the 3 first steps, and then Stephen will present the step 4 and 5, which is really about selecting the metrics. So if you move to the next slide, let me tell you why again, sorry. So the first 3 ones, and then we're going to see the metrics appearing in a second. Thank you so much. So, I think, I've screened about 140 Gen AI and agentic solutions. And in fact, I think, Stephen, you probably did the same. We've worked on hundreds, if not thousands, of pricing and packaging companies. So this type of frameworks do not come from an improvised idea. It comes from grounded experience. And why that tool, by the way, I think you discussed it, Stephen, is the fact that we see a lot of people diving almost blindly into outcome-based models. It seems very tempting, but I think we need to recognize the complexity that's involved into outcome. So I will describe each model in a second. So let me use an analogy, right? I don't think anyone would sail randomly in the ocean without checking the compass, right? You got to understand the winds, the current, the temperature, your position, the direction of travel. And this first tool is really about how to do this, right? The ocean of metric is really broad. So first we need a clear direction before scoring the metric, which is what Stephen is going to present. So that's exactly the raison d'etre of these 3x3 metrics. So, what we want to care about now is typology. I will describe the 4 typologies, but how you use the tool is essentially you're going to have to think right now, for those who have an agentic solution in the market or going to launch, try to plot your solution in this matrix. And to do this, I'm going to help you by defining exactly the position for each of the 2 axes. So the first axis, the x-axis, is the scope of agents work or agentic work, because there could be several agents. Think of it almost as how ambitious and autonomous your AI is. So is it automating a list of tasks? Think of it, for example, as running research. Is it orchestrating a process? That's the second position. Think of it as, let's say, managing a claim process in insurance. Or is it independently achieving strategic goals? So, for example, optimizing your advertising spend on digital channels. Another way of thinking of it, which I like, is almost thinking of it as teams, right? Is your agent or agentic system an individual contributor that can manage sets of tasks? Is it a director and its team who can orchestrate multiple processes? Or is it an executive VP, vice president, that can strategically lead teams toward higher level objectives, right? So that's the x-axis. So think of it for a second: tasks, process, goals. And then the y-axis is the level of attributability, which is, in lay terms, how clearly can you link your agentic solution directly to business results? So 3 levels again here. Is it diffuse or indirect? Again, I'm going to use analogies. If it's diffuse or indirect, is it almost like a smart analyst that's working a bit behind the scene, does a lot of useful things, but it's really hard to measure the impact in the grand scheme of things. Is it medium attributability, as in it's clearly contributing to the outcomes, but there are several external factors that are being involved, a bit like a project director? Or is there a direct or strong attribution, like a sales rep? You know the contribution of the sales rep, you know exactly how they make, how much pipeline, how much closing they're going to be doing, right? So it doesn't mean it's better or worse, it's just the level of attribution you have. So if we understand the two dimensions, and feel free to put in the chat if the framework is not really clear, and you'll see we'll go back to some of the questions on during Steven's section, especially about attributability. But essentially, you have to plot your agentic system or offer within this 3x3. And then you're going to see a typology, and that's where you should be focusing. So if we move to the next slide, there's essentially in my world 4, and again, it's a model. We can agree, we can disagree. It's a model, so I'm just going to help you read the model. And there's really 4 types of metric typology. The first one is per agent. It's, to keep it very simple, think of it as almost like paying a fixed salary to someone, whether the agent works or not. So you pay for the availability of the agents. For example, Nullify, you can pay 800 per month or per year, sorry, for a developer agents. So you're buying availability. The second one is the agentic activity. So think of it in the real world as pay per hour consulting or a consulting retainer, right? You pay when the agents are effectively working. You're buying working time. So retainer was for the first one, sorry. The retainer for the agents. This one would be pay per hour, or it would be pay per minute, right? Or pay per, think of it as you pay for effective work time. And in this one, the great example would be Hippocratic AI, which is a virtual nurse or a set of nurses. And this virtual nurses, you pay them $10 per agent hour. In that category, you will also find, for example, Devin in the coding space, where they created their own metric. Think of it as a composite metric called agent compute unit. So you pay the actual activity. One is kind of clear. There were 10 hours of agent time because I worked with this agent as a patient for X hours, or I used X hours of agents in the systems. Third and last one, almost last one, sorry, is agentic output. So there's a fine line between the two, right? Which is, in this case, you care about the deliverable. It's tangible. So for example, Decagon, you can pay, it's a customer service platform. You're going to pay each time a customer has a conversation, right? So you pay per conversation. So in that case, you don't pay just for the time, you pay for the effective output. But I would also include in this one Salesforce Agentforce, as you may have seen, and I think, Steven, you mentioned it. Now you actually Salesforce on their agent platform, they move to a pay per action model. You pay for credits, right? So there's a proxy in between, but each action, think of it as updating a customer record, costs you 10 cents. As a result, this agent output range from discrete actions, Salesforce that I just mentioned, all the way through comprehensive deliverables like solving an entire, doing an entire conversation, which could imply different steps, and that would be Decagon. And these kind of models, by the way, they're not new as well. I mentioned pay per hour, I mentioned retainer, I mentioned the salary, right? So in the real life, the closest thing would be, in fact, business process outsourcing. In customer service, managed print service, where you pay per page, payroll, where you pay per produced payslip. You had this model for decades. So it's the similar type of thing. And the last one, which is the one everybody talks about, is the agent outcome. And in that case, but it's wrongly defined. The outcome, in this case, the payment is directly tied to achieving a measurable goals. So one example is Vantage Autopilot. It's a FinOps platform So think of it as I'm the CTO or the CIO of a company. I want to make sure that I don't overspend on AWS. The autopilots make sure that I always optimize at base my consumption. And they take 5% of the savings they generate for me on my AWS cloud spending. Another one is Decagon. So you're going to say, look, I just mentioned Decagon. Well, in fact, Decagon, they have two models. One where you pay per conversation with the clients, but they have a second model like Finn from Intercom. That's quite famous these days because they set a precedent. They also charge per resolution. Resolution as in if the ticket was marked as resolved and it's been done entirely through AI. So there can be many conversations, but if none of the conversations are resolved by AI, you pay zero effectively. So that's the outcome. So again, outcome ranges from business outcome all the way through very strategic outcomes such as savings, additional revenues, and so on. So one important note on this one is that, as Stephen mentioned, you can combine these metrics, within bundles. Replit, for example, they combine checkpoints and actions for the copilots. Some actually have different metrics for different segments. Decagon, because some of their clients do not want to pay per resolution because they're probably not mature enough to accept this kind of metrics, or they don't really trust that they could forecast against it. Or some actually have different metrics to address different use cases. Hippocratic AI, the nurse platform I mentioned, actually they have a payout per hour model to charge for the agents, but they have an agent marketplace in which you can create your own agent nurses, and you get a profit sharing with Hippocratic. So as you can see, you can have different agent models or different agent typology of metrics combined within across for different segments. So it's not like a one best way. You can be very creative. So now, how do we use the framework? Just as a conclusion, we move to the next slide. Very simply. So if we did a good job at explaining this, you're gonna find with the compass where you should be focusing, right? That's the yellow square. And then, of course, you should consider adjacent cells. And what adjacent means, it's the L shape centered around the square. So it's, in fact, the cell that's directly up and the cells that's directly to the right of the one, that is your go-to cell. So that means that, for example, in this case, I probably shouldn't consider per outcome. I should focus on per activity and per output. I know if that makes sense, but think of it like you're preparing your journey. That's your compass. Start figuring out roughly where you are, and then you fine-tune the direction. You focus, on where you should be going, but be very careful about agentic outcome. It's very trendy. Probably not the best scenario. As you can see, it's only one cell, right? So probably 2 cells can hit per outcome. So handle with care. But as I said, there's 4 more steps. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, but say, Stephen.
Yeah, and I would just add here that, Michael, would you agree that when designing hybrid pricing, the best practice is to keep to 2 or at the most 3 different metrics? People sometimes go a bit crazy here and have, 5, 7 pricing metrics. Some of us here are old enough to remember trying to buy something from Oracle. And they would have a complicated spreadsheet that the salesperson could not really explain. And that was actually seen as an advantage. But in the world that we're moving into, where an AI is actually going to be evaluating your pricing model for the buyer, we have to manage the degree of complexity so that we can make it transparent enough for the AI to understand and process. So one of the beauties of what Michael's just saying is that by picking your primary pricing metric and then restricting yourself to adjacent squares limits the range of options that you have to think about and consider.
Absolutely. And just as a conclusion, you can see at the bottom of the slides, the statistics I found in terms of percentage. Outcome is 10%, right? So we discussed it. So again, probably we need to move on, but in the chat, if you picked outcome, and based on what we discussed, you believe now that what you do is not exactly outcome, but maybe output, feel free to give us a shout out. And I think now we have 4 more steps to discuss, and I think, Stephen, you're going to be driving.
Yeah, I think this is still you if you want to.
Yeah, it's essentially what I said, right? So we just discussed the fact that we need to focus on, you know, the AI job. You need to focus about really understanding the goals of the customers. We actually deciphered the 3x3 metrics. Thanks to this, we evaluated where we should be focusing, what's our go-to metric, and we said that we need to investigate the adjacent in an L shape. So now we're done with that. So I think the next step is that we need to list the metrics within that field if possible, so that we've reduced it. And then, of course, we need to evaluate what are the right metrics. And as far as I know, there were a lot of tools in the market about, you know, asking the right questions and so on, but I've never seen a structured way to actually evaluate how to pick a metric. And that's what we created with Stephen.
Yeah, and I just want to call attention here to the dotted line that feeds from step 7 back into step 1, and remind people that good design is an iterative process. You iterate and iterate and iterate, especially in an area like agents, where so much is changing and so much is happening. So pricing is not a once and done thing. It's something that you need to iterate on and have a process, maybe even an agent or family of agents to help you with the pricing as you go on. But let's go on to the next slide, Liam. So in AIs love benchmarking. Those of you who follow the foundation model wars know that whenever Meta or OpenAI or Google or DeepSeek or Anthropic or Cohere and so on and so forth publish a new model, they have benchmarks that they benchmark against. And Michael and I believe that if pricing is going to improve, we need to get much better at benchmarking pricing models. And this is a first step towards that. So we believe, after a fair amount of analysis, that these different buckets here, value alignment, feasibility, acceptability, attributability, predictability, customer centricity, and possibly profitability or tracks costs, these are each relatively orthogonal to each other. So each of these can vary independently of each other. And we're currently scoring between 0 and 5. We're going to gather a lot more data and see if this range should be extended or maybe even compressed. But the 0 here is important because we actually use the 0 in the scoring algorithms. So that if you anywhere that scores a 0, well, it depends on which scoring algorithm we use, but basically we want to have zeros so that if you multiply by 0, you get 0. So having a 0 in as part of this this framework is important. We want to show you what this looks like in practice, though. So let's go on to the next slide. We are still testing multiple different scoring algorithms. That's part of the research work that we are doing together. But as I said, you'll see that in many of these, we multiply at some point in the algorithm. And the goal there is so that if there are zeros, the whole thing goes to 0. Obviously, in simple summation, that doesn't happen. And we tend to use logs, log scores here because it helps to the scores to scale properly. And again, we're going to do more research into each of these algorithms, but let's go on. Next slide, Liam. We actually did this for FinAI. So we scored FinAI. We picked FinAI because it's such a popular agent. And the way that we did this is that we built a fairly complex prompt that follows best practices in prompt design. and we just used publicly available information. And we applied it to FinAI's pricing. And we did this from two perspectives. We did it from Intercom's perspective as the product owner, but we also evaluated it from the buyer's perspective. So is this a good pricing model for the vendor? And is this a good pricing model for the buyer? So you can even see that FinAI, which is a very, very well-regarded pricing model, does not necessarily score well on every factor. And you really want to be in 4 or 5 on each factor if you can. And we've seen this. So it's FinAI was weak on can this pricing metric be defended over time, or is there a risk of it becoming table stakes? And does this pricing metric give FinAI positive differentiation? Now, if we had run this prompt right after FinAI was introduced, we probably would have gotten different results, because this is taking into account market dynamics in the background. And that's another important thing to remember here, is that yes, you should evaluate your pricing before launching your pricing metric to see how you think it's going to work, but you can't rest on your laurels. It's important to frequently reassess your pricing metric. And these are the sorts of actions that pricing agents are going to enable in the very near future. Let's go on, though, and take a look at this from the buyer's perspective. And it's interesting that the buyer... Sorry, go ahead,
if I may. Yeah, there was a really great comment also from Laure on the chat, because I'm sure that's what you imply as well. Laure is asking if we shouldn't ask the current buyers to fill out the scores. I'd love your view on this one, but my view is pretty simple, is it has to be a mutual exercise. You have to do it yourself, and you always have to ask your clients, because a good metric cannot live in isolation or based on assumptions. So the more transparency, I would say, the best. And of course, also it's going to evolve, as you said, because you need iteration as new features kicks in, as competition moves, as a relationship vis-a-vis value you create can change because people get more fluent. So what's your take, Stephen? Do you think you should have your customer help you almost fill that sheet as well?
I think that would be interesting and worth trying.
Yep.
I think most buyers would struggle to fill it out because they don't always think that way. I think the way that I would address this is, and we actually support this in the prompt, is that you have to say which buyer. And we made this a bit generic in this particular example, but really, if I was doing this with with someone, I would have them run the buyer prompt, against different companies in their current customer base. And this is one of the great things about the Gen AI and a well-designed agent, is it will actually do a good job of putting itself into that company's shoes. So yes, it's always worth talking to your customers and getting their insights, but I think there are much more scalable ways that we can do this today by running it. You can easily run this against 100 different buyers and get deep insight into how different buyers are going to regard your pricing. Let's go on and just take a quick look at the next slide, though. Oops. Oh, sorry. Go back. I thought this slide. Yeah. It's interesting to see two things here. One is that this particular pricing model slightly favors Intercom over the buyer. Now, if you're at Intercom, you might think, oh, that's a good thing. I'm not sure that that's the case. I've run a number of these, And in a number of and sometimes the pricing model comes out as being better for the buyer than the seller. And when I've done this, the seller has often said, "Oh, that's not good. That this is giving my buyer an advantage over me." I'm not sure if that's the right way to think about this. I think that if I was going to put my finger on one side of the scale or the other, I would want a pricing model or pricing metrics that favor the buyer slightly. I think that is necessary grease to the wheels of commerce. But anyway, Michael, do you have some thoughts on this comparison of the buyer view versus the seller view? I call it the product view on the slide for FinAI.
No, I think you nailed it. That's something you added that I really like, and I think there has to be some good level of overlaps. If there's too much differences, that means that either you don't understand the value, or you try to extract too much value. So yeah, I think this product your view versus the buyer view is actually really critical. It was not in my initial version, and I think that's a really great add.
So let's go on to our invitation here. So Michael and I are looking for partners to further develop this approach, and we are willing to invest our time to work with you with a. Now, if we get inundated with 100 different requests, we will have to triage them. But we are looking for people who are interested in following us on this journey and working with us to develop metrics for evaluating pricing models. And we believe that this is going to be actually absolutely critical to the evolution of agents that will help us all in our pricing work. Yeah, AIs really develop best when there are benchmarks available to drive constant improvement. Some of you who are deep in the generative AI world will recognize the acronym GANs, Generative Adversarial Networks. GANs play a huge role in improving AI. And we need to work out the ways that we can introduce generative adversarial networks into constantly improving packaging, value, and pricing frameworks. We are in a rapidly shifting world. I lived through the introduction of the internet. I had my first website in 1994. I lived through the transition to subscription models, which was great fun. But this is orders of magnitude more complex, more important, and faster moving. So, Michael, give us the sales pitch on why people want to work with us on evaluating this framework and using this framework on their pricing.
Well, it's pretty easy, right? When I look at companies choosing the right pricing metric, essentially they grow probably 20 to 30% faster. It's going to be probably a lot more, given the fact that now with Gen AI, we all know that the user-based model is over, seat-based model for pretty much, or if not all, agentic software companies. So if you don't choose the right metric, that's a massive, massive problem on your P&L. That's a massive problem in your future as well, because maybe if you choose the wrong metric, you don't grow, you don't convert. But worse, if you choose the wrong metric, you could grow at the beginning, but then the metric could actually be bad for health. Some metrics actually go down in the future, so you don't immediately see the problem. We've seen many examples, I'm sure you have as well, Stephen, where people chose metrics that went down over time. So long story short, I would say choosing the right metric is probably the most important thing in Gen AI right now. And many people are actually gambling their company's future by choosing the wrong metric. So I think we do this for the greater good. It's an important exercise. And for those who are interested as well, this applies, of course, for other things than just agentic AI. If you have friends in the manufacturing space moving to product as a service, the model applies very nicely too. So it's a general framework that has extreme applicability in agents right now, but it works pretty much anywhere in pricing recurring services. So I would say that's why it's vital.
Good. So there's been Leon, let's go on to the next slide. So there have been a lot of questions, in the chat, but there are, let's go through and try to pick some of these to discuss, Michael. So I just put a couple of these on the slide to get us going. And these are questions that regularly come up in Ibbaka's discussions with our customers. So I'm just going to start with two, and then we can go over to the chat. And please start dropping your questions into the chat as well. And if we don't answer them now, we will answer them in follow-up communications. So how does agent pricing impact cash flow? Clearly, I deal with too many CFOs, but I get this question all the time. And I don't think there's any one canned answer to it. I think that the only way to answer this question is to actually build models and test the models and understand what different assumptions are being used. But Michael, do you have, I'm sure you get this as well. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, so I get it more from established companies because they have more to lose, right? If they have a SaaS company, they have to launch an agent. They've been through Gen AI, probably they've lost some margin points to Gen AI. So how does agent pricing impact cash flow? I would say two main reasons. The first one is the fact that cost structure of Gen AI, which is one of the underlying capabilities of agents. We discussed it during the previous webinar, and probably most people in the room knows nowadays that because every and each interaction with agents which are using themselves Gen AI has a material individual cost. That means that if you use a per user pricing or a wrong metric, in that case, you're hurting your margin, and you may actually end up having the most active users yielding the worst margin. And on top of that, choosing the wrong metric would mean that you don't capture the value. So it's a shooting yourself in the foot twice in each foot, essentially. So how does it impact cash flow? It doesn't maximize revenue. And on top of that, your costs are exploding with each and single interactions. So I would say that's why CFOs have to get a lot more fluent with pricing in the age of Gen AI and agents. Manufacturing, that was the case. We all know that the cost of an incremental object is material. In SaaS, the economics has always been economies of scale. It's not the case with Gen AI, so it's a new reality for many CFOs in SaaS.
Yeah, and another one is, do agents always imply product-led growth? So I'll take this one, and the answer is no. Many agents take advantage of product-led growth, but it's not inevitable. And companies that are solving complex problems with agents and companies that have multiple agents that need to be orchestrated are almost certainly going to have some form of sales-led growth for the next few years. Remembering that increasingly, though, sales-led growth is itself managed through and driven by agents. But Michael.
Would you agree? I would say the big difference might be the way the sales cycle is being led. I think everything around Gen AI is going to be less and less implementation, less and less work probably, and more change management. So in fact, they could be heavy sales cycles, but the emphasis on the sales cycle might be less on the solution engineering and more on the painting the vision, helping with how to reorganize and so on. So at the end of the day, if we use again the 3x3 matrix, to your point, Stephen, if you're goal orientated with high attributability, what it means essentially is you are giving a lot of agency, and a lot of agency comes with a lot of responsibility and risks. So that means in my world that you're going to have to convince people, and there's going to be high tickets, and I don't see high tickets being signed in the product-led growth. However, it doesn't mean there couldn't be, a product-led approach to it and product-led expansion, right? But probably the first deal is going to land through traditional sales. Not for everything, as you mentioned, but for the most complex product, for sure, I don't see sales going anywhere for the next 2-3 years.
There's so many great questions in the in chat. I'm just going to pick Laura Sorba's question first, which is, how about companies that are serving late adopters? The types of companies that are very complex and technology adverse. I feel there'd be an initial step to consider educating the market before going to more complex pricing, packaging, and modeling. For sure, Laura, but I actually think that agents lead to simpler packaging and simpler pricing, at least initially, because you are reducing the amount of functionality and you are easing the burden on the user. But Michael, what are your thoughts on Laura's question?
It's always hard to answer when I'm thinking about adopters. I'm thinking about bank insurances, because it's even harder, or public sector. I really think it depends on the nature of the agents. What we discussed earlier is protocols. Some of the protocols that are emerging simplify the connectivity of agents over existing systems. And in fact, and I may be wrong, by the way, because I'm not a technologist, Laura, but I would say there's a massive opportunity to actually, remove a lot of barriers from old systems with the agents. So you could almost mimic what robotic process automation was doing, essentially, with agents, but on steroids. So even though it's not the main goal of agentic AI, I think there's an opportunity to actually put agents in more traditional companies to actually automate a lot of actions in older systems and completely changing the user experience. Essentially, you could remove a lot of things and just use the old systems as database and not have to do a complex migrations to more modern systems. So I see agents as a way to put new wine in old bottles, especially in late adopters. It could be a great way, or just to embrace use cases in these industries. So there might be ways around for some use cases. That's my feeling. If you think in bank, a lot of systems could still run on older database or older languages, and just have agents creating the monetization layer in a much faster way than modernizing the entire systems. In fact, when you think of it, you removed a lot of the entire UX stack but you could still keep the old database, which could still be valuable.
So much more to discuss here, but Liam, do you want to bring us home? We've got some more very exciting webinars coming up in the future that we'd like to let people know about. So back over to Liam.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, post-webinar, I know Axel and a few other people asked about the recording deck and everything. Yeah, we did mention that post-webinar, we'll get our team to clean this video up and send it off to everyone who's joined. Share it with any of your colleagues who couldn't make it or who didn't sign up. I encourage you all to follow Michael, Stephen. You know where to find them on LinkedIn, and Michael, you post a lot. Your articles all on LinkedIn, very comprehensive as well. And we're gonna see Michael again in 1 week, so twice in 1 week. How lucky are we, Stephen? I know you're a very busy man, Michael, so appreciate it. Yeah, that one. Oh, Mark, Stephen, and Michael, yeah, they're back at it because we did a January one, the AI monetization in 2025. That was a huge one. So this is just your basic mid-year checkup, and then everything else. So yeah, when you guys get this deck, feel free to join. Resources all at the end. Who to follow. Resources like downloads. I mean, we put out the value pricing and billing for the agent economy report just last month. I think it was, Stephen. That's the AI agent report. And then any questions that were not answered, we could probably pack that up into a blog post and send that to everyone as well. Yeah. Stephen, Michael, you guys are all good? Any other?
Thank you very much, everyone. We really
thanks so
appreciate your
much.
time, and thank you, Michael.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, you guys.
Take care.
Bye
Bye.
now.